Have you ever noticed how, in a lot of religious conversations, people use words like the church or Christians super broadly when they're actually talking about something way more specific? I hear this all the time. I mean, what are we even talking about when somebody says the church? Are we talking about Roman Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, Lutherans, Calvinists, American Evangelicals, the non-denominational church down the road? Because those aren't the same thing. And it's the same problem with the word Christians. Which Christians? From where? From what time? Believing what exactly? Those questions matter way more than people act like they do, because the label by itself really doesn't tell you enough. There are a ton of different Christians and a ton of different churches, and when people shove all of that into one big label, we stop talking about something real. We start talking about a caricature, and then people argue like the caricature is the real thing. That happens inside Christianity, and it happens outside Christianity too. Both sides do it, both sides benefit from it, and both sides usually end up sounding way more certain than they should, because nobody slowed down enough to define the category first. Inside Christianity, people say things like, the church has always taught this, but a lot of times what they really mean is their tradition, their denomination, their pastor, or the little stream of theology they personally grew up around and learned to trust. So they use the historical weight of 2,000 years of Christianity to back up something that might only be 200 years old, or 50, or maybe it's just some church habit people kept repeating until it started sounding official. And people outside Christianity do the exact same kind of thing. They say, the church did this, or Christians believe that, when what they're actually talking about might be Roman Catholic history, American Evangelical culture, or some TV preacher they saw online. Sometimes it's purity culture from the 90s. Sometimes it's a weird fundamentalist pocket somewhere. Sometimes it's one bad church experience. But those aren't all the same thing. And that vagueness works for both sides. It gives one side an easier thing to attack, and it gives the other side an easier thing to hide behind. One side gets to blame everything at once, and the other side gets to defend everything at once. And both sides get to skip the harder work, which is actually saying what they mean. That's why this matters. Because if your categories are lazy, your thinking is going to get lazy too. Bad categories make bad arguments. So if you want to go after Roman Catholicism, then say Roman Catholicism. If you want to talk about Calvinism, then say Calvinism. If you want to talk about a certain kind of evangelicalism, then name that specific kind of evangelicalism. Don't swing at the blur and then act like you prove something. That's not clarity. That's not honesty. Most of the time, that's just somebody using broad language, because broad language makes it easier to sound confident. And this isn't just some technical wording problem either. It's actually a respect problem. If I'm going to talk about people's beliefs, traditions, history, and relationship to faith, then I should care enough to say what I actually mean. Because when we stay vague, real damage follows. Somebody has one bad experience with one form of Christianity and walks away thinking they've now seen Christianity. Somebody else grows up with one doctrinal package and thinks they got the final version of the faith. But they didn't. They caught a ray, not the whole sun. They ran into one stream of light, one angle, one expression, and then mistook that partial encounter for the whole thing. That happens all the time. And both sides are way too confident, because neither one slowed down long enough to ask what they were actually talking about in the first place. Once that happens, people stop having nuance, and it is usually generalizations and judgments based on those assumptions or beliefs. And the discord gets stuck, because once your language gets sloppy and you're thinking from a point of confidence, you stop asking the questions that actually matter, like, am I being open to an idea, where an idea came from? Can I express my point of view clearly, in contrast? You stop asking what came from Jesus, what came from tradition, what came from a denomination, what came from culture, what came from fear, and what just got stacked on over time until people forgot it was even a layer. And before long, You can end up defending things Jesus may not have actually keyed in on, or rejecting stuff Christ may not have told you to reject. At that point, you're not dealing with faith clearly anymore. You're dealing with unnamed assumptions. That's part of why this matters so much to me, because a lot of religious conversation sounds strong, but it's actually sloppy. It sounds settled, but it's built on categories that were never really defined, and that's a dangerous way to handle faith. So before we argue about Christianity, before we defend it, before we reject it, and before we try to fix it, maybe we start with a much simpler question. When you say the church, what do you actually mean?